Good afternoon, everyone. Let's go through day 18 of the Diddy case. Let's go. And shout out to ABC News.
That spaghetti mess of cables in your junk drawer? Gone. Me.
Hi, Amy Pilgrim. Thanks for streaming with us. Incredibly graphic testimony today in the Sean Diddy Combs trial. And we have to warn you, some of what you hear may be disturbing. The third alleged victim, who goes by the pseudonym Jane, was back on the witness stand for her first full day of testimony. The prosecutor played an audio recording for the jury of a hotel night with a male prostitute Jane identified as Dawn. On the recording, Jane and Dawn are looking for a condom, but Combs didn't allow it and can be heard saying, quote, "You're taking that expletive." Jane testified, quote, "I just didn't want to disappoint my lover. He would be unhappy and wouldn't be satisfied with me." Jane went on to tearfully tell the jury about her birthday in 2023 when she said she was made to have sex with 3 different men in addition to Combs. The prosecutor asked why. Jane responded, "I don't know. It had become so routine," and added that she turned robotic. Jane told the jury that after a while, Combs didn't have to directly ask her for these hotel nights. She testified, "I knew it was to be expected." Combs has pleaded not guilty to all charges. If convicted, he faces the possibility of life in prison. Coming up, we have a former SDNY district court judge to give us some insight on what it's like to be in charge of such a high-profile case. Plus, we're taking you inside a courtroom identical to the one in this trial, so you can get a better sense of where this is all playing out. But we begin with ABC News Chief Investigative Correspondent Aaron Katursky live outside the federal courthouse here in Manhattan. And Aaron, we heard from Jane today. What did she tell the jury?
This was a deeply unsettling day, Eva, because Jane outlined the sex that she said she was made to have with at least 11 different men. She saw photos of all of those men. She said she couldn't remember all their names, but she knew them as Leo or Michael or Paul. Paul, she said, was Sean Combs' trainer. And she said that she was made to have sex with these men in Turks and Caicos, in New York, in Los Angeles, in Miami. And she said that it became so routine that she just became robotic. She knew what she had to wear. She knew that the baby oil would get all over her feet, make them sticky. She'd be unsteady. She talked about the soreness in her back from being made to be in one position all the time, performing oral sex at Sean Combs' direction. She remembered the infections that she got and how she was not allowed ample time to heal before the next hotel night. And even the jury saw some of her anguished text messages telling Sean Combs that she couldn't do it anymore. And the jury heard his response in a voice note, his voice booming throughout the courtroom, where the response seemed unsympathetic, calling her crazy.
What was she like on the stand, Aaron?
She sits there and is almost meek. She's not a meek-looking person. She's a presence. Her hair swept to one side. She was in sort of a magenta or maroon, I guess, skirt suit. But her voice was so soft, and for much of her testimony, she was sobbing audibly. She needed to pause to dab her eyes. Her sniffles were right into the microphone, so they were quite loud and really punctuated the difficulty of her testimony.
The jurors were shown photos of Jane with various men during those hotel nights. How did they react to seeing those pictures?
This wasn't the first sexually explicit material that the jury had seen, but you couldn't help but be almost heartbroken for what she said she was put through. And I think that showed on some of the jurors' faces as she talked about the sheer repetitiveness and how she was made to dress and what she was made to do each and every time. But as the afternoon wore on, I think the jury, I'm not sure they became inured, but their reaction, they listened. but they did not show as much of a visual reaction, especially when there were these lengthy text exchanges that Jane was made to read. And her notes, before she would text Sean Combs, she said she would gather her thoughts by taking notes on her phone, and prosecutors made her read those as if to corroborate her feelings.
Jane also discussed a hotel night that happened in July 2024. Why is that timeline detail important here?
There was one in July 2024. She also said the last one she remembered was in August 2024. And so that shows that just weeks before his arrest in September 2024, Sean Combs was engaging in the kind of behavior for which he was under a federal investigation. And Jane said it persisted throughout their 3-year relationship, such that 90% of the time they were together, she was involved in having sex with other men.
What was Combs' reaction to all of this today?
He was listening intently and following along with glasses on to read some of the text messages, hers and his. And of course, he listened to his own voice as it echoed around the courtroom. The voice note messages that he left her, saying that he didn't want to do this with her anymore, saying that she was being dramatic or confronting him about sex. But Jane also talked about how Sean Combs paid for her teeth, new veneers, because he didn't like her teeth, and paid her $10,000 a month rent, which she said he seemed to hover over her and always brought it up so that she was reminded that he was paying the rent. It made her feel obligated, she said, to perform in these hotel nights. And at one point, Combs kind of winced a little bit. Remember, though, he's not supposed to show facial expressions because the judge said that could get him kicked out of court.
Aaron Kotursky for us there at the courthouse. Aaron, thank you so much. And here now to break down the testimony from today is ABC News legal contributor Brian Buckmeyer. We heard from Jane on the stand. What stood out to you about her testimony today?
I mean, just a few things. I mean, Aaron talks about that $10,000. I found out that Sean Combs is supposedly still paying that $10,000 a month. But there were other things where she would talk about the sexual abuse and as well as these debaucherous nights or hotel nights, because she doesn't refer to them as freak-offs. And you would get to the point where she would be told to have sexual intercourse with a male escort, and she said that, well, I didn't want to do it because he wasn't attractive, and then go into a room with Sean Combs, and there would be a conversation, and he would look disappointed, but ultimately he would say that person can go, only to get another person to come in. And so for me, I was kind of two minds. So one, Sean Combs, at least in this instance, is not showing the violence and aggression that we saw in Cassie's testimony, but here he's still saying, well, it's still going to happen, just not with the person that you're choosing. I think both sides are going to be able to use that fact however they want to in terms of benefiting their case. It's going to be very interesting when cross-examination comes up on those points.
We've also heard testimony about drugs in this case. Jane talked about it today. How does what we heard from her play into the charges here?
So I know a lot of the time we're talking about the freak-offs, the hotel nights, the debauchery, whatever you want to call it. And that's a big part of the RICO conspiracy. But there are a lot of underlying charges as well involving drug sale and drug use across state lines that if any one of those predicate acts are used in a form of trying to find Sean Combs guilty, he can be found guilty maybe not of the freak-offs, but of providing drugs and selling drugs to the people who are participating in it. So I think it's a strong point to make nonetheless, even if, let's say the jury, for whatever reason, doesn't believe Cassie, Mia, and Jane.
Jane testified today, and you mentioned that he's still paying the $10,000 for her house. That money played a role in her decision to stay. Why does that matter in this case?
Because that's what the government is hanging their hat on when it comes to the sex trafficking. Don't forget, sex trafficking is through force, fraud, or coercion. The coercion, I think, is what they're attaching it to. But the numbers really played out in my mind because my understanding is she started dating Sean Combs in 2021. There was a lease agreement that we saw that was signed on April 4th of 2023. And then months after that, there were messages about not wanting to participate in these hotel nights. I think that timeline, as well as where she might have been living with her child beforehand, the fact that she said she wanted a big home and a big yard for her child, that's gonna, I know it's gonna come up again against cross-examination and asking the question of, could there have been alternative resources for this home and you merely just wanted to live with Sean Combs, not wanting to do something else?
Jane also showed receipts today as well. What were these receipts for? What's the significance of them here?
Right, so when we talk about receipts, the receipts were about the repayment of some of these flights for the sex workers or the entertainers, that she would put on her own car the flight to go from Atlanta, for example, to New York, where they may be, and then making sure they were taken care of by leaving money downstairs. Sometimes she would pay on her own directly and then get reimbursed with Sean Combs, and some of those payments and receipts show that Sean Combs is still in one way, shape, or form, directly or indirectly, participating in this racketeering conspiracy.
Okay, and you mentioned this person that she was choosing and not choosing. That person she was flying back and forth was someone she told the jury that she chose. Why does that matter here?
So why it matters is because you know you're going to hear it when the defense takes a stand or has an opportunity to cross-examine Jane and say, well, you chose to do this, in the same way that we heard with Cassie as well. But here, we're going to see that she says she felt pressure to do so, that she chose these two specific workers, I think it was Cabral and another gentleman by the name of Anton, because the other one she didn't feel safe with. She didn't know them. She figured, if I'm going to participate in this, I might as well participate with people that I know and I feel safe with. And I think getting ahead of that and making that statement rather than having Combs' attorney attack her for that was a smart move by the government.
The jury was also shown some text messages between Jane and Combs. What did those messages say?
Right, so here we have a couple of examples of the text messages here, and it really highlighted the point in one sense that she wanted to participate, and she explained those text messages saying, well, I wanted to keep it alive, I wanted to keep the intimacy going, because I know that's what he wanted to get. What he wanted, not necessarily about violence attributed to it, but also talking about she wanted the getaway, she wanted to spend time with him, he promised that. I think there might be an argument about fraud there, that he promised these getaways, promised he's traveling, promised all of this, but it always got veered back into these hotel nights, these debaucheries. And so what she wanted, a relationship. What she got, sex work in a sense.
Brian, thank you so much for being here with us. And still ahead, we take you inside the courthouse, inside a courtroom identical to the one where Sean Combs is on trial. And up next, Brian and Bernardo Villalona break down the prosecution and defense strategies at the end of day 18 of testimony in the Sean Diddy Combs trial.
At Harbor Freight, we rigorously test and refine our tools. Look no further than Harbor Freight.
FABULOUS everyday life. Hello, Moto.
Welcome back to ABC News Live. Another week of testimony in the books in the Sean Diddy Combs trial. Jane taking the stand again, testifying about the explicit sexual encounters during her relationship with the music mogul. Let's examine the key legal strategies we saw play out in court today. We have Brian Buckmeyer breaking down the defense, Bernardo Villalona analyzing the prosecution. Bernardo, we're going to start with you, because this was an interesting point that Brian raised just a minute ago. Jane said at a certain point she expected these sexual encounters. She wasn't really saying no. So what's the strategy here? Is this something that's going to hurt the prosecution's case?
I think it's definitely going to all come down to closing arguments. And the reason I say that, because Jane is much more difficult to decipher this coercion part. I mean, you can say the prosecution is saying, well, you know, he was paying her rent and paying her expenses, and she relied on that, and he will hold it back if she didn't engage into these freak-offs. But I think the prosecution is also taking into account the testimony of Dawn Hughes, the expert, hoping that this jury still remembers what she said in terms of gaslighting, because that's pretty much what you get from the testimony that Jane is given, where Sean Combs would be like, you're crazy, you're not making any sense, this doesn't make any sense, and blaming things on her. But she got so robotic because of how many times she participated in these freak-offs. She said that 90% of the time after the first hotel night, not freak-off, hotel night, that 90% of the time that she spent with Sean Combs was actually engaging in these hotel nights with these different escorts.
So Brian, is this a problem for the defense or an opportunity?
I think every witness they put on is a problem, but I think they can turn into an opportunity because they can juxtapose and confront the fact that Cassie and Jane are two very different situations. I think when I was later in the afternoon or morning, there was a lot of examples of her saying, well, this male escort came in and he was smelly. He wasn't attractive. I wasn't feeling the vibe. And I went to the room, I told Sean I didn't want to participate in this, and he gave me a look that he was disappointed. But Sean said he can go away, and that was fine.
But then he bought another one.
Yeah.
Then he'll bring a different escort. So it's not like, oh, tonight we're not getting it in. It's I'm going to bring someone else because you're not going to ruin my night.
Correct. But it's not the force or the coercion or the beating that
But
we
I said
saw
this
with
is a
Cassie.
different type of
Well,
coercion.
well,
This
no.
is a mental one, a
And when-
financial
and
one,
when
different
she-
than Cassie.
We'll get to the finances because by accounts she might have been a millionaire if you're following certain people. But the force there, she kept saying when asked that ultimate question by the government, but why did you do it? She didn't have the Cassie answer of like, oh, he was gonna beat me upside the
Well,
head.
not yet,
I wanted
not
to
yet.
make him happy. He felt bad. It wasn't the force there. It was she wanted to do it.
Yeah. As of now, I think they're going with, remember, she just got on a stand yesterday. She was on a stand all day today. So I think they're dealing with the coercion part. But remember from opening statement, there is at least one time where there was violence. And I think that's where they'll get to on Monday.
Well, okay, this witness is expected to stay on the stand through next week, right? That's a real long time.
Well,
No?
because she's a main
though.
witness. She's a main witness. You got to think because she's named in the indictment. Well, victim of two, but she's part of two of the charges specifically applied to her. So that's why she'll be on the stand long. And the cross-examination is going to be extensive.
She was a part of the superseding indictment. She was not one of the original alleged victims in this case. And I think they might have had a stronger case with Cassie and Mia. And this, I think, was a witness that they went a little bit too far in the reaching because I don't think this helps, especially when you think of the order. Cassie, bombastic, huge, violence. Yes, that's horrible. And then we started to peter off. The last witness we were talking about was Brianna Bongalan. And now we're talking about Jane. It seems like they're not reaching a crescendo as we're getting closer to the end. It's kind of seems like it's petering off. And that's not good for a prosecution's case.
But let's look at the evidence in this case, because they showed audio recordings. We heard those in the court today. Text messages, photos of Jane with these men during these hotel nights. Is that a problem when you start to see all that?
Her explanation of the text messages, I think, is going to be difficult for her because she is saying one thing, doing one thing, and then rightfully explaining to the jury, well, I was doing this, but this was in my mind. So if you're looking at it from the other side, and Sean Combs is messaging, when he says something about pressuring her to do the free calls, oh, girl, you fooling, you joke around, something to that extent. That's not a person who seems aggressive or mad. It seems like a person who thinks, wait, you just seem like you're playing this off.
Yeah, but what's the point is what she says, though. And
What's important is what she's conveying and what his intent is.
Yes, but what you're seeing and what you're saying and reading, I mean, what the jury's going to focus on is, okay, what do I have that's tangible evidence? And I'm not even going to think about what you're saying on the stand. What do I have from back then when it actually happened? Because that's the same thing that they're doing with Cassie and the other witnesses. And if you have text messages and notes and stuff that says, I don't want to engage in these hotel nights, then she's conveying that she doesn't
How many
want
times
to.
did she say that?
And
Compared
it still
to the time
continue.
that she's flirting, it's like 20-1, and you can see from his
But
response.
all you need is one. All you need is one time.
But if you're having a
Let's put
conversation,
it
Well-
two times. Just the two hotel nights, and then you got it.
Okay, so here's looking ahead. Who do we expect to see the prosecution call after this witness?
not Christina Coram, not D-Rock, not
So-
to be in the inner circle.
I think, first off, I think Monday is still going to be a big day. Just because we know from the opening statement what else the prosecutor has to get out of Jane. So we're talking about recording, so we'll get to see that. I wouldn't be surprised if the prosecutor calls maybe one or two of those escorts like they did with Cassie in order to corroborate these
Are they
hotel
going to call
nights.
the ones that she hired herself because she felt more comfortable with those, or the ones that Sean forced her?
All they need is one or two. All they need is just one or two.
But we're not going to hear from Christina Coram.
I highly doubt it.
From one of the evidentiary arguments when they tried to get one of the text messages in, you don't do that if you have those people coming in to testify. So that's why I think they're not coming in.
All right, we'll have to leave it there today. Thank you both for being with us. Coming up, our cameras take you inside a courtroom identical to the one Sean Combs is sitting in every day of this trial. And we're joined by a former judge who knows a thing or two about presiding over high-profile cases. Her insights coming up next.
This is Pod 5, the first fully immersive sleep system. Intelligent.
Welcome back to Burden of Proof, the case against Diddy. The full media circus is out covering this trial, from every network news organization to countless vloggers to curious people just getting in line to see it for themselves. So you may be wondering, what is it like to be the judge presiding over such a high-profile case? Well, my next guest is no stranger to such cases. She's overseen numerous big trials, including Mafia boss John Gotti and the landmark stop and frisk case. Joining me now is former U.S. District Judge for the Southern District of New York, Shira Shenlin. Thank you so much for being here with us. So just to start, when you are the judge over such a high-profile case, what are the challenges that you face?
There's a lot of challenges. First of all, you know that the eyes of the world are on you and on the story. So you don't want to say anything out of turn. You don't want to make a joke. You don't want to speak with a mistake here or there. You want to get everything just right. In most cases, there's nobody in your courtroom. And so no mistake matters. But in a big, high-profile case, you're very conscious of the attention. So that's one thing you're thinking about. You're also thinking about the jury and how they need to be protected from, with all due respect, the media. What they can't do is go home and read print media. They can't go on the computer and Google. They can't go on social media and write each other. That would be wrong. And they're told that every day from the beginning, from when they were first selected, then the first instructions, and then every day, at least with me, I started the day and ended the day reminding them, you may not do any research on your own. Don't try to find out. Don't listen to any media. Don't read any media. That's your job. Everything you need to know is in the courtroom. And that's very hard to enforce.
Yeah, because you think we're always on our phones, right? There's been a lot of emotional, a lot of graphic testimony. Two of the witnesses have used pseudonyms. We heard a lawyer for the Jane who was on the stand today raising concern because on social media, her name was being floated out there. How do you make sure that these witnesses are protected?
You know, maybe I don't know something, but I don't think this is a dangerous kind of guy like a couple of the cases I had. You mentioned I tried John Gotti Jr., I tried the big arms dealer, Victor Boot. When you have cases like that, there's a real fear that there's potential violence. Somehow I don't think that about this guy. I could be wrong, but I don't think anybody's going to follow the jury. Some juries are semi-sequestered. Mine were, where they were taken to a drop-off point so nobody could follow them, nobody could question them. But I think the judge must have thought all this through. They are anonymous. Nobody knows their names, so nobody's going to reach out to them. Now, I think they're safe.
All right. What can you tell us about the judge that's handling this trial, how he runs his courtroom?
I don't know that because he's a fairly new judge. There are judges in that court who've been on the bench 35 years, and there are judges on that bench who've been a judge 1 year or 2 years. I think he falls in the latter category. So he probably has not tried a lot of criminal cases as a judge. And I don't think he was pretty much a civil lawyer at a very good firm. So I think he tried civil cases. So, you know, it's high pressure for him. I bet he's talking to other judges and getting a little help and advice when he has tough things to decide. That's okay to do with other judges.
We saw him yesterday really, put Combs in his place and say, you can't be shaking your head like that at the jury.
I heard that.
If you do that again, you're going to get thrown out of this courtroom. Were you surprised to hear that?
I am, because a defendant in a criminal case has a right to be present at every stage of the proceeding, has a constitutional right to confront his accusers. So it's very important that he be in the courtroom. Now, if somebody truly misbehaves, like shouting and screaming and jumping up, they can be taken out of the courtroom and watched on video on a TV screen, but that's not the preferable way. So I understand he was making hand gestures as well as faces, and she could threaten him with being handcuffed behind his back where the jury wouldn't see, but then he couldn't wave his hands around, but he could still make faces. But I think I'm sure the judge has now put the fear of God into him, and hopefully he won't do it again.
And we were able to get some video of a courtroom that's identical to the one that this trial is playing out, and we want to show people. What can you tell us about the room where this is all happening?
It's a big courtroom. There's plenty of room for the public to get in, but there's usually overflow rooms. So if it's full from media or just citizens who want to watch, there's a second room nearby that they can watch on a video screen. There's usually 2 tables, one for the defense, one for the prosecution. If they're side by side, and I'm trying to see here, then the prosecution table is nearer to the jury, and the defense table is further from the jury. If they're front to back, the prosecution table is in front, and the defense table is behind it. So I can't see on your screen where the tables are, but always the prosecution is closer to the jury and closer to the judge.
Well, thank you, Judge, so much for being here with us today. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
And thank you for joining us. We'll be back with new episodes every day of the trial. The show streams right here on ABC News Live, Disney Plus, and Hulu, weekdays at 5:30 p.m. Eastern and Pacific. For even more on the Diddy trial, make sure to follow our podcast, Bad Rap, The Case Against Diddy, hosted by our very own Brian Buckmeyer on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. I'm Eva Pilgrim in New York. Have a good rest of your day.
And that is day 18, Diddy, day 18.